Welcome back to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. Today, I am very excited to have on one of my business coaches, Jimmy Springston. He is on talking about clarity in chaos, okay? So taking your business from chaos into clarity. And so he has a passion for people, communication, and data, combined with his experience as an Air Force combat analyst and a leader of a Fortune 150 organization. He is going to equip us today, and he's helped several organizations like Burn Bootcamp develop thriving cultures that produce results. So we're going to hear from Jimmy about his own journey into EOS and how he's personally developed not only himself, but so many other leaders. So sit back, grab a notebook, get ready to unleash your potential. So welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. First
All right.
podcast.
Did I miss anything in your bio?
You didn't miss anything. I was a leader in a Fortune 150, not of a Fortune 150.
All right.
That would be
good clarification.
Yeah.
I like your honesty there. So at Burn Bootcamp, we have implemented the EOS system. Okay, Devin and I, you've heard us talk about this a lot on this podcast. We love the book Traction. Rocket Fuel is the ultimate book that moved Devin into a visionary and me into the CEO role and the integrator role. And so when I took on that challenge, I hired Jimmy as a coach because it was the first time that I really was responsible for as many things as I am in the company, and that I was going to unleash Devin into that true visionary role that he is. And so I knew that doing that meant that we needed some new systems, and we needed to make sure that we could effectively work together in that combination. And so the EOS is something we've been working on for about 2 years, almost 3 internally, and then we've rolled this out also within our franchise system just in the last 12 to 18 months. And so awesome. That's a little background behind EOS. So Jimmy, could you talk to us about the EOS process?
So EOS is an operating system designed for small businesses. They break it into 6 key components. There's a vision component, there's a data component, process, a component they call traction. There's an issues component. Did I lose count?
No,
Is that it? All right, that was off the cuff.
Yeah, so obviously those 6 components, and what's the most important component from your perspective? That's a tough question, isn't it?
You want to say people, because we care about people, that's why we do what we do. But I think in order to take care of people, we got to have the vision. Because, we talk a lot about trust and clarifying expectations is a big part of that. And I think the vision component is probably one of the most important places to spend time on, because that's where we need to have like the debate, the conflict, make sure everybody understands it, that they have clarity, they've had a chance to be heard if they disagree with aspects of the vision. Because at the end of the day, we need people to be bought in and have clarity around the vision, and then that jumpstarts all the other work. How do we measure if we're hitting our vision? What kind of processes do we need? What kind of structure do we need? So it's just, I would say it's the most important, because if you don't have conflict, debate, clarity, and commitment to the vision, it's really hard to get the other things going.
Yeah, and without traction in that vision, it's just what?
Hallucination.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's that balance in those components that we talk about, where I would say Devin really hits that visionary component for our company at Burn Bootcamp, but then without something that, the rubber hitting the road and you taking that vision and making it to life, it's just a dream and it's just hallucination.
Right. Yeah, we talk a lot about trust and the speed of trust, so clarifying expectations kind of gets into that vision. But if you don't deliver results, it's just a hallucination. You lose trust.
Yep.
And as a business, if we don't deliver results, we just won't be around.
Yeah. So what are some symptoms of a business that maybe you've worked with in the past that wasn't implementing a system like EOS? So if someone's listening to this right now and they're running a business, what are some things they may be experiencing that could nudge them a little bit to dive deeper into EOS?
Some symptoms that you might be experiencing that you might need an operating system and some of these components. So you probably had early success. You probably have good team health at the beginning. You probably started the business with friends, family members, some colleagues, maybe some buddies from college. and things are going well, you don't need a lot of processes, you don't need data because you kind of have control. The process is in your head.
Yep.
The data, you're seeing it every day because you're touching your clients and customers. So I think for a while things seem really good, and then the first symptoms probably emerge when it's like you're just having almost too much catastrophic success, you know? So you're having so much success, more clients, you hire more people, you're starting to have to go further out into your network where maybe the trust isn't there. And then as you invite more people in, they're not doing things the exact same way you would do. Maybe the customer experience is suffering. So I'd start to say like frustrated customers might be an early symptom. Team health might be an issue. And just like you're going to bed at night with a little more fear because you're losing that awareness that you used to have because you just have more employees out there.
Yeah, I would say at Burn Boot Camp for us, one thing that I've seen change a lot now implementing the EOS, process is not as much whiplash in our business, right? More structure, more process, so we can hold people accountable, and we can understand from a data perspective where things are going wrong and not a feelings perspective, which is something I thrive on because I love data.
Likewise.
And so when you can really structure those 6 pieces of the pie and starting with, let's say, data, then you can really understand where you need to go attack and put processes in place and the right people in place, and that helps you hit that vision.
Yeah, I mean, I think predicting the issues before they come, or like crossing the river as close to its source as possible is like always the best. And I think, data is one of the first places to go to for that.
Yeah. So you're in a coaching business, so you have several different clients. I'm in the fitness industry and franchise industry, but you can use EOS and you can help people in multiple different industries and also size of business. Is that correct? Or do you feel like
Absolutely.
EOS is only for a certain, type of industry?
I haven't met an industry yet where I haven't seen EOS work. Even if I think back to my time in the Air Force and different organizations and units there, or my time at USAA, the Federal Savings Bank, they all would have benefited from EOS. And if they've survived that long, they usually have adopted organically those principles.
Yeah.
And so I haven't met an industry yet where I haven't seen it work. I coach construction industry, restaurants, retail, all sorts of, and I even have one client in a nonprofit space, and I can see it that it's going to work really well there too. I would say the only time I don't see EOS work is if you're still really in an early startup phase. I think it's good to be aware of the principles and strive, but like some of the meeting cadences and the flexibility you need from processes, I do see people struggle sometimes if they do it too early when they're still needing that flexibility.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I want to implement EOS. What would you say are the first steps?
Yeah, so my background in the Air Force, I was a decision analyst, and so I was usually attached to a general or colonel like you and Devin, and I would help structure the decision, but I didn't have a lot of opinions about which decision they should make. So I usually like to think of things in like, what's your objective? And then what are like 3 good alternatives to consider? Weigh the pros and cons of each. You usually have competing objectives, speed, cost, quality, things. And so I'll frame it maybe in like, what are your alternatives? And so the approach we took when I was an integrator sitting in your seat at the construction company I worked at was we self-implemented. We bought the book Traction. We read it as a leadership team, literally, and just got it out every week, and we just went step by step. That was good. It forced us to struggle with it. No one was helping. We learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes. It went slower, but pros and cons to the self-implementation.
Yeah.
You can go the implementer route. So sometimes people get confused in EOS. There's an in-house seat, like you have, called integrator. And then there's an external person you can hire called an implementer who's trained by EOS. Pros and cons, cost more money than self-implementation. You might not struggle as much, so you might not get that friction and growth that you might, but you're getting some support. And then there's spaces in between, like you could hire someone like me that's not an implementer, but you're kind of self-implementing, but I'll coach you and be your thought partner. And it's kind of that middle ground. And then EOS even has a self-implementation concept called Basecamp. And you can watch all the videos that an implementer might get trained on, and then it's kind of another middle ground. Yeah. So I don't know if there's a right way. I think just being aware of the alternatives and the pros and cons and trying your best. And then just being open to changing if what you're doing is like hurting team health or hurting you. Yeah. Personally, you might, try to open your mind up to trying one of the other alternatives. Yeah. So we self-implemented, then we hired an implementer after a year to kind of stress test our self-implementation. Okay. That worked well for us. So.
Yeah, and Burn Bootcamp self-implemented. The leadership team read the book. I sent some of my employees to the EOS Worldwide Conference to get even a deeper learning, so they brought that back. I hired you. So I think that we've taken it a little bit in like bite sizes personally, and that's why I think it's taken a little bit longer to fully implement everything, right? All the different tools, and I'm still not using all the tools of EOS, which we can get into here in a minute. But what would you say are some common challenges that businesses face when they're trying to implement?
Capacity. They're busy.
Yep.
It's just hard. You're wanting EOS usually because of those symptoms. Mm-hmm. You're probably feeling overwhelmed. You're biting off more than you can chew. You're a bunch of people wearing a lot of different hats. Yeah. In EOS, we would say you're sitting in a lot of different seats. So you're usually overwhelmed, which means you're having time management and capacity issues. So when you think about all the stuff EOS takes at the beginning, it just takes time. I think so. Capacity is one challenge. I think if you're really going to do EOS right, you need to be mentally prepared to delegate. And I think a lot of people, again, struggle with trust. Who are they going to delegate to? Do they have any processes or way of staying aware once they do delegate? So I think delegation is usually a friction point. And then we just talked about this morning, but usually when you start EOS, most people I know that are honest, they say they're really frustrated. And it's not EOS's fault, but EOS just like floods you with awareness of all your imperfections. Yep. All the commitments you've made, but you weren't tracking, so it wasn't a big deal that you didn't keep them, or all the projects you started but didn't finish. But when you start having to-dos and you're tracking them, and rocks and you're tracking them, and scorecards, it just kind of floods you with awareness. Yep. And as long as you can like overcome that and just see it as an opportunity to get better and not like get too down on yourself. Yeah, I would agree with all of that, and I would add that one way I could see it not go well is if you don't have the buy-in from everybody in the leadership team. Yeah. Because then you create inconsistencies with how they're managing their team versus another department, right? So if not everybody's doing a level 10 and a same page meeting or the quarterly pulse, then the language isn't shared by all, and processes aren't shared by all. No, that's true. And I did skip that. I'm glad you brought it up. Like, getting buy-in and having some real conflict with the team that like, is this the solution to our current problems and the problems we're predicting over the next, 2 to 5 years? Yep. If we can get everyone to agree that there is a problem that needs a solution and that EOS is a viable solution for that, then I think your journey goes way better. You could do it how I did it with my visionary, where we decided we didn't invite people in for the conflict. We didn't really approach it from a team health perspective, and we probably pushed it too hard, too fast on too many people without getting them bought into the why. Yeah. And we got a lot of resistance. Again, we learned a lot from that, but so if someone's listening to this, I think sometimes getting bought into the why after they hear some results that maybe you've seen in your own companies or companies that you've coached. What are some of the results that you have seen with EOS implementation? Yeah, one of the first questions people ask me is usually about profit. Did you see your profit go up? And in our company, we were doing about 20 million when we started EOS. And when I left the company to coach full time, we were doing about 50 million. And I wouldn't say percentage-wise we necessarily got more profitable. It might have happened. I don't know if you could attribute it all to EOS. I think what EOS did was help us maintain our good margins that we had as we grew. Okay. It gave our leadership team and visionary specifically freedom back. He was a visionary sitting in multiple seats, project manager, he would do whatever it takes. So I would say there was a quality of life component. He wanted to like really become the CEO he always wanted. So I would say maintaining your profits and just having more predictable profits instead of this kind of up and down where the average is say 15% gross margin. It's more of a consistent 15% gross margin.
Yeah.
So maintain those profits as you grow. Freedom to actually like grow into that visionary or CEO seat. That's a big one. And then being able to enjoy, this kind of gets back. Like a lot of the people I coach, they're older than you, 40s, 50s, 60s. They might have bought a second house, have, you know, a boat, a camper. Just they want to visit their kids in college more, but they can't leave their business because they're in so many seats. They don't have scorecards and processes and the trust for it to run. So I would say it's back. That's kind of back into the lifestyle. Like getting to live the life they want is really a big piece. Or if they want to sell it, I would say is a third category. They either want to sell it or hand it off to a kid is a lot of times what I see. And they need something to hand off to the kid, or they're not going to get the multiplier they want if they go to sell it on the market because the business is really all about them. And if they left, the business might suffer. So getting EOS in early before you plan on trying to sell, I think is a big incentive for a lot of people.
Would you say that you've seen results in companies' team health when they implement the EOS?
Yeah, I'd say it often suffers before it gets better. Back to like you get flooded with awareness. You're kind of moving a lot of people's cheese. You're bringing in accountability. People used to get, I would say often we're doing things their own way. And as we kind of debate and commit to one way of doing things so that we can do it consistently and exceptionally and improve it, like processes, there's some mourning of freedom, like they're losing some of their freedom. So I would say at the beginning, it's a challenge. I think if we start like what we were doing today with team health and the why and speed of trust and 5 dysfunctions of a team, we can kind of minimize some of that pain. But I would say it gets worse before it gets better. But then if you like most things, if you're disciplined and consistent and stick with it and you're vulnerable and have a growth mindset, the team health then eventually starts to really improve.
So EOS is one process, but you and I talk a lot about a lot of other, foundational principles, right? You just mentioned a couple. So let's talk about the other systems that you like to introduce alongside EOS.
Yeah, I'm super grateful to Gino Wickman and EOS, and you. To me, I wouldn't have been able to like add on the other components without a strong foundation. So sometimes, and maybe you can help me come up with a better analogy, but I compare it to like your iPhone has an operating system, and with that iPhone, you now have access to an app library, and you can download other apps. And I compare EOS to the operating system. And once you get good at EOS, you can start to download apps. So if whatever your favorite books are, like mine is Nonviolent Communication or Free to Focus, which is a time management book, you can download like a personality profiling system like Culture Index. So I think before EOS, we read books and we have all these concepts.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the place a little bit.
Yeah, we want to download them, but there's no operating system to download them onto. And so my favorite ones, 5 dysfunctions of a team, speed of trust, nonviolent communication, free to focus. I'm currently reading a book called Top Grading, and that'll be kind of like an app that I put in my app library that clients can download. So I'm very grateful for EOS, and once we get EOS kind of running or it's already running, I like to work with clients and like, what's their favorite apps they want to download into their business and their culture? But you need a good operating system for that to really be successful.
Yeah, and I mean, even within the EOS operating system, there's some great books and Rocket Fuel, like I said, is kind of what pushed us into the position that we are, and then How to Be a Great Boss. Everybody's reading right now in our office. Our people leaders are.
They came out with the process
book. So even within the EOS system, there's a lot of things you can go deeper in.
It's a fantastic platform. I love the company. I appreciate all the books. I've gone through some of their online classes that they offer, Rocket Fuel University or the Integrator Masterclass. So there's a lot out there in their ecosystem, which I recommend all of it. And then am a big fan of still taking advantage and going outside of their ecosystem and downloading other apps.
Yeah.
too,
So I want to talk about those 5 really quickly too, because they're great books. I think we've recommended a book. Devin and I love a lot of these that are on this list that you talked about. But EOS is a system, and it doesn't always take into account the relationships, right, or the trust. Or you could just run that like a system, but it kind of removes any like human element in a way. So that's where you bring in some of these other books. So let's talk 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Yeah.
Just really quickly, why is that important as kind of a step 1 to go and read as you implement EOS?
Yeah. Well, so often, like when I was an analyst in the Air Force, we would usually talk about objectives and then recommend tactics to meet those objectives. So I kind of see as team health is the objective. EOS is a solution to help it. So it's kind of the why underneath. Like EOS is the solution, but like what's the problem? Oftentimes the problem might be existing team health, or we're just trying to get ahead of future team health issues because we know we're about to go through a lot of growth and add a lot of people. So we want to get ahead of future team health issues. And so I think EOS is a big part of that solution. But I like 5 dysfunctions because it gives more of the why. Why do we need EOS? And I think the way they walk us through trust and conflict and commitment, and accountability and results, then when you look at EOS through those lenses, you're like, oh, EOS helps us have space for conflict. We have weekly meetings and quarterly meetings. We have things to have conflict over, like scorecards and processes and one-page strategy, vision documents. Then EOS helps us with if we make commitments, how do we track them and know if we're keeping them? That's like our weekly to-dos and our quarterly rocks. So I think, I could go on, but I think hopefully that gets the point across.
It's framework, right? It's framework for a lot of that. So you talk a lot about trust. Speed of trust is on your list.
Yeah.
Tell us why that is important, for successful business.
Yeah. So we read 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a really easy read. I mean, it's a couple hours, maybe 2. So there's pros to that, right? It's easy for a team to digest. It's quick, but for me, it was like, well, if trust is the foundation of the healthy team and is what you need to eventually get the accountability and results you need, I wanted to go deeper into trust. And so someone recommended Speed of Trust to me. I had read it before EOS. It was like a lot of books. You read it, you're like, oh, that was good, I like it, and you did nothing with it.
You don't know how to apply it.
I had no idea how to apply it. So when I came back to the team health initiative in our company, trust was our big weakness. Speed of Trust was on my bookshelf. I got it back out and read it with a different mind, and now I saw Speed of Trust in a totally different light, and I saw how it gave a lot of practical ways to build trust. But even before that, how do we talk about trust? How do we have a model for trust? How do we break trust into, like, is it character trust or competence trust? And how do we build trust? So it gave our leadership team and our company like a mental model, some language, and a framework to more intentionally talk about and build trust in our company, which was the foundation of the 5 dysfunctions. And again, I saw how EOS and a lot of the tools in the EOS toolkit helped put the systems in place to build the trust that we needed.
And then number 3, I feel like is the next step, is that nonviolent communication.
Yeah. So we had a lot of team health issues, our own fault, me and the visionary, and we'll admit that all day. We could do our own podcast on all the mistakes we made. But he had a great growth mindset. I mean, he still does. He got introduced to a life coach. And so we started working with her. Her name's Stacy Vicari. She's out of Austin. She's phenomenal. I recommend her to everybody. So Stacy's the one. We started meeting with her almost like a marriage counselor. We were seeing our life coach. And she's the one that introduced us to our personality profiles and nonviolent communication. So that was the introduction. And we started practicing. It was a way to start to communicate in a more efficient and effective way where we could have more hard conversations, but it still met our need for like kindness, but accountability. And so once we got introduced to NVC, we went all in. We hired a trainer out of Florida who you now have met. and she trained our whole company. And like a lot of things, it was hard, it was clumsy, but if you just kept practicing, we got better and better. And it just made everything in the company better as we became better communicators, whether it was holding people accountable or showing appreciation.
Yeah.
See, the book goes into both. And so just from a team health and communication, accountability, it really checked a lot of boxes for us. And it was, you know, EOS can't be all things to all people.
Yeah.
It's a great thing, and it allowed us to download the app of nonviolent communication onto our company. And so we love EOS, and we love Culture Index for personality profiling, and we love NVC. And to me, those are kind of like the three legs of the stool that all need each other.
So the two other books we talked about was Free to Focus and Traction. So what does Free to Focus help people do?
Yeah, Free to Focus was recommended to me. I went through the Rocket Fuel University and the Integrator Masterclass. I was very fortunate to get a little small group coaching from Mark Winters, the author of Rocket Fuel.
Yep.
So when I was telling Mark about some of my challenges, our leadership team challenges, I was in an EOS group in Louisville where I live. There's about 20 to 30 of us that get together every month, integrators. I was hearing their problems, capacity, time management.
Yep.
Kept coming up. EOS has the Delegate and Elevate tool, which touches it, but to me it didn't go, again, deep enough. So Mark Winters recommended Free to Focus, and I see why now, because it really complements the EOS journey. He did give me affirmation that like I wasn't alone. That's most people's biggest issue is being overwhelmed, time management. So yeah, we read Free to Focus as a leadership team, and then we liked it so much we rolled it out to the company. Anytime an employee was having time management or feeling overwhelmed, we would recommend the book. We would dive back into the tools and just keep working on time management being one of the first root causes we went to when people were feeling stressed or not hitting their results or something. We always assumed positive intent, that it was a time management issue, and we just kept leaning into Free to Focus.
Yeah, I think that the time management and then what you learn in Traction about process or right person, right seat, right? When there's conflict or there's capacity issues, it's going back to those three tools, in my opinion.
Yeah, and even if an employee was like behaving in a way where it looked more like a culture issue or a right people issue or a character issue, we would still assume positive intent out of the gate and be like, hey, we think you're showing up with these unpleasant feelings and these behaviors that aren't congruent with our culture because you're overwhelmed and you're in too many seats. So before we say you're not right people, let's, again, work on time management, time blocking, prioritization. Let's bring clarity to all your seats. Let's help you deprioritize some things or delegate things. And then we'll work on that for 30, 60, 90 days before we come back and tell you you're not a right culture fit. So that was helpful.
All right, and then we've already touched on Traction, but that was the fifth book that we would encourage you guys to add to your library. Did we miss anything?
Free to Focus, Nonviolent Communication, Speed of Trust, 5 Dysfunctions. I love How to Be a Great Boss, which we talked about. I love the Process book. No, I think we hit them all.
Really, Traction is in the EOS library, so really any of those books.
Yeah, I think Traction's, I mean, it's definitely where you start.
Yeah.
So I would start there. And then it's not a book, but I do love Culture Index.
Yes.
Or
Predictive Index,
Yeah, we started with Predictive Index, and I got certified in that, so I could administer it. And I still do occasionally, but I like the model of Culture Index a little better because the person we interact with is an employee, they're an expert. I'm not as effective as a full-time Culture Index. So I just like their model a little more. So now I steer all new people to Culture Index, and that really complements the self-awareness, the seat. You can run a Culture Index on a seat, on a person. It can help mine for conflict and get ahead of issues. It's just been a great tool that complements the nonviolent communication and EOS.
Yep, and we're both craftsmen, so let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us with the Burn Boot Camp podcast. Guys, make sure that you subscribe to our channel. We would love a review. How did this podcast impact you? I would love to hear about it, but make sure you subscribe. You will never miss a podcast episode in the future. And we're going to end with 2 claps on 2. Okay, here we go.
I screwed this up.
It's okay. You got this. Ready? 2 claps on 2. 1, 2. Yes.